Let's give you guys a pull. 2024 Lotus Emira against a 2022 Porsche Cayman GTS 4.0. Now, this Lotus Emira has been reviewed previously on the channel, but some slight changes and modifications since. So this is on the Sport chassis. That's the stiffer suspension, 6-speed manual transmission. We're back to Cup 2 tires, 245 section width in the front, 295 in the rear. Back to stock brakes as well, which are Ferodo DS 2500s. It is a stunning, absolute gorgeous car. We have a third cat delete, which you guys will definitely hear. Makes it quite a bit louder than stock, with the Miltech valve controller as well. And on the interior, we have Alcantara wrapped steering wheel. Mine is leather, and he swapped out the original seats, which are a bit polarizing, and he put these carbon buckets. There's no padding right now, but the owner is getting the padding delivered soon. The 2 seats with the padding comes out to about $6,500. And also, as you can see here, the mesh around the bottom linkages and the shifter boot at the top has been removed. So you have it totally exposed. And the reason the owner did that is that it's more aligned with the actual Emira concept. They had to add the boot and the mesh because of safety regulations and reasons. The buckets do make it a little bit more challenging getting in, but not too bad. Mid-engine, rear-wheel drive with double wishbone. So we have this sill right here from the aluminum extrusion chassis, right? And that does push your feet over to the right. When you first get in an Emira or an Evora, you are going to notice that shifting quite a bit, but you get used to it pretty quickly. I think that this might not be as far shifted over compared to the Evora, if I recall correctly. We have the short shift kit installed as well. SRS service urgent because of these carbon bucket seats, not the OEM seats, so he's getting that hardwired to say no issue, so you don't have that pop up every time. Now we're powered by a 3.5 liter supercharged V6. That's the Toyota 2GR FE engine with an Adelbrock supercharger. It's making 400 horsepower, 310 pound-feet of torque with a 6,800 RPM redline. Now you can see in tour mode, it has this weird fade into red, but if you go into sport, you can see it more clearly there, or even track. Car weighs in normally around 3,200 pounds, but because of the carbon bucket seats, it's a little bit over 31. And he's also going to be installing a lithium-ion battery, and that's going to bring it down to right around 3,100 pounds. Unlike the Cayman, we have double wishbone in all 4 corners, but both this and the Cayman are coming in right around $100,000 on the market. So buying new or used, gonna be right around 100, a little bit higher, a little bit lower, depending on options and such. And I know a lot of you guys, myself included, were debating between the Cayman and the Emira because they both are mid-engine, rear-wheel drive. They both are very purposeful driver's cars that come in right around the same price point. But the question today is British or German? Which one's right for you? That decat instantly makes this car so much louder. One of the complaints from stock is that it's not loud enough until you hit red line, whereas here, even in the lower RPMs, makes a great noise. That supercharger whine. The short shift kit actually is feeling pretty good. Great throttle response for heel toe. That was an issue with the Evora, but they've completely fixed it. No issue at all now with the Emira. Back on the Cup 2 tires, amazing steering through this hydraulic steering rack. That Cayman behind us has electronic power steering, which does mute the feedback through the wheel, but here you guys can see it just chatter away with the road texture. But you have to manage the weight a little more carefully here, because we have 39% weight distribution in the front, 61% in the rear, whereas the Cayman is 45-55 front to rear. This is actually closer to a 911 than a Cayman in terms of its weight distribution. And as a result, even though this has double wishbone in all 4 corners, compared to the Cayman's theoretically inferior McPherson strut, this gives way to understeer more readily. Now, granted, you have to be pushing it a bit harder, but even on street driving, it's at pretty low limits, you can elicit understeer. you guys a pull right here. Horsepower in a 3,100 pound car, a little bit over 3,100 pounds. The short shift kit I do think is fine. It's okay, it feels good, but I prefer the stock shift. Like right there, I was getting stuck trying to get to second, trying to downshift there. But this car is not about power. It is not gonna rip your face off with speed, but it's gonna make you feel so much. Amazing damping from Lotus right from factory. I love the sport chassis. I think it is perfect. It is not punishing at all. So much grip from these Cup 2s. Wow, what a car, dude. For $100,000, you get such an experience. So much pleasure, so much of that special feeling that you want when you get behind the wheel of your weekend car. And the thing is, this is comfortable enough, even in sport suspension, to be a daily driver. The touring is if you really want it to be supple and even more comfortable. But if like me, you were concerned when you were speccing your Emira, hey, should I go sport or touring? I don't want this to be too harsh. Lotus has always done suspension so well. Even in the Evora, where they didn't have the sport touring option, you have this beautiful balance of body control while also maintaining comfort. This car is just so good. So good. And I like what the owner has done with it. The last time we drove it, the mods, the brake pads, and the tires, they threw me off. You lost that amazing brake feel. Now, Lotus doesn't have the firmness of Porsche. Porsche, at least modern Porsches, have this immediate firmness to the brake pedal, which gives you confidence, and it's a nice feeling. But what Lotus is doing is a little bit more traditional with their brake pedal, in the sense that you get a gradual bite, and it has a very communicative brake pedal feel, as do Porsches, but just that initial bite is the main difference. Is it firm or is it more gradual? And here you get more gradual, which I think is fine. It's great. It actually gives you a higher resolution in the initial few millimeters of travel to modulate that brake. And you want that in this car because, again, you need to manage that weight distribution to keep the weight over the front to not elicit understeer. And that bit of a challenge adds to the drama, adds to the occasion, adds to that specialness, which is why I personally, after being a huge Cayman fanboy for years and years and years, after driving Caymans and 911s, I was like, hey, Cayman is the superior mid-engine layout versus rear engine. But after driving the 911, I actually prefer a lot of 911s. And because you have that weight distribution, that little more drama, interest, intrigue, because we actually find learning and pushing our limits and finding that sweet point where you get a little bit of challenge, but not too much such that you're overwhelmed or annoyed, but just a little bit, that you enjoy it. Let's give you guys a pull. You guys will not be wanting for more power. This car it has enough power for the chassis, and you gotta love it. I mean, Lotus is for the driver that values communication. They value the connection to the machine. They pioneered this aluminum extrusion chassis that keeps the weight down while maintaining rigidity and keeping it at an affordable price point. Or rather, Aston Martin adopted that for their VH era cars. God, this car is fucking incredible. And I like what the owner, Dan, has done. Like having this No boot here and no mesh. He actually 3D printed this part. You can buy it from him. It's nice. It's more aligned with that Emira concept. It looks cool. It's a special place to be. I would sum up the car by saying that you're getting an experience of a much more expensive car at a lower price point. I think the value at 100K, and I'm not talking about necessarily performance and whatever. I think performance-wise, this and the Cayman, they're quite similar actually. But less about performance, but the experience you get at 100K, I would argue, is a bargain, because this feels much more special. This is like a little baby supercar in that way. But now let's see how it compares to the Porsche Cayman GTS 4.0. Now it's time for the 2022 718 Cayman GTS 4.0, direct competitor to the Emira. This is powered by a flat six, naturally aspirated 4-liter, making 394 horsepower, 309 pound-feet of torque. We have strut suspension in all 4 corners versus the double wishbone in all 4 corners in the Emira. Weighs right around the same at 3,200 pounds. Remember, this is closer to 31, like 3130-ish with the carbon bucket seats. But stock for stock, they're right around the same weight. Styling of the Cayman is, of course, more understated. Maybe not as exotic or beautiful or striking, but it's still a classic, timeless-looking vehicle. This one does not have any mods to speak of. And getting into the interior, I mean, it's a Cayman. You get that great Porsche build quality, that classic design. I like that both owners today have these little sleeves for their keys. It's a nice touch. We actually reviewed this Cayman previously on the channel. The owner, Sherman, is a gentleman and a scholar, letting us review this car once again. Now, one thing I very much prefer about the Porsche is just the gauge cluster. I like an analog tack. And remember, with the Cayman, you have 3 gauges, not 5 like in the 911. But this is just a classic timeless car. The steering wheel is far less polarizing. I love that he has these dark inserts here. This steering wheel is just such money. Although I do prefer the feel of the Alcantara in the Emira, and also it's a little bit chunkier. So I have larger hands, and the thicker steering wheel in the Emira fits better. It feels better. But the actual roundness of a circular wheel versus the squared off shape, I definitely prefer this. And if this was Alcantara, I think it would be money. We have a bunch of different modes here. We're going to start off in sport. The sport exhaust is engaged. Wing is up. We're going to keep PASM off initially. Now, first impressions, right off the bat, you're sitting quite a bit higher here than in the Emira, but that Emira has those aftermarket bucket seats, and those make you sit really low. You have amazing visibility in the Emira, and the stock seats are a little bit too high. Carbon buckets get you nice and low, and also to give you more communication because they're stiffer. They're very comfortable even without padding, and you have this amazing communication through your body to the chassis because it's more direct. Here, these seats are quite padded, and they're very comfortable, but I'm feeling quite a bit higher, and I don't have as much lateral support. They're also not as stiff, and you don't feel quite as much chassis communication. The engine, of course, in this car, in my opinion, is more special. I've heard other people say that the Emira is more special because it's supercharged, it has that interesting whine, but this naturally aspirated flat six just sounds so good. Both of them are very linear, but the sound and the way it builds to redline is so satisfying. It feels like you're really ringing it out all the way up to 7,800 RPM. The Emira has a shorter redline at 6,800, but the thing is, the way that the engine builds as you approach that redline, it constantly feels like a tease, and you're oftentimes hitting the rev limiter prematurely. And in fact, in the Emira, it makes that peak horsepower right at redline. Very, very linear, but I still prefer this engine because I feel like I'm getting a greater experience throughout the rev range. We have amazing throttle response in both vehicles. The steering here, electric power assist, is not even close to the Emira's. It is good for E-Pass. Now keep in mind, when you drive an E-Pass car, you need to like set your sensitivity higher or your threshold lower, meaning that there is feedback, but you have to really pay attention and dial your sensitivity up and the threshold down to feel it. God, these gears are long, dude. The actual performance in a straight line between the two is quite similar, but this feels to have longer gearing. So you're gonna see me short shifting quite a bit on this drive, just to get that satisfaction of shifting, but very natural throttle response there. I'm not sure if the rev match is actually on or not. Well, that's part of the reason why rev match is on. Let's go to normal mode. Engage PASM, sport exhaust. I get a proper feel for that throttle response. Still a beautiful, beautiful throttle response. One thing that I love about Porsches is how natural they feel, all the inputs. You don't have to think about them. From the throttle to the brakes. Now, I'm used to the Emira, and I don't have any issue with the inputs, but I will give it to Porsche that this one doesn't quite have that immediate firmness I was talking about, but the brakes are still a little bit more one-to-one and don't require any thought, any adjustment. Traction is kicking in there. I'm trying to play with it. Now with the 45-55 weight distribution, we have 235 section width in the front and 265 in the rear. And remember, the Emira was 245, 295. So wider section width and also more of a difference, in part because of that weight distribution difference. Now the transmission here is like both better and worse than the Emira. So it's better in that it's always predictable. You don't have to mess with it. It's very clear when you're going from gate to gate. A little more, again, natural and one-to-one. You don't have to think about it. But the Emira has this more mechanical feeling, which is more satisfying to use. And the shifter here, look how much it angles between third to then second. It tilts so much, and it makes the actual throws feel unnecessarily long. But with the Emira, you have to be very patient with it. Sometimes it doesn't want to go into gear quite right. It has these little quirks. This one will always work. It just doesn't have that same level of satisfaction and mechanical nature to it. And also the delineation between each gate, that the Emira sometimes has this ambiguity as you go from geared into neutral. It's not as crisp of a delineation. And that ambiguity isn't as, I don't know, it can feel a bit weird at times. You don't have any of that here. You can tell that with Porsche, they've polished the car over years and years. It is more refined, it's a little bit more dialed in, but the trade-off is that it loses some of that specialness. It loses some of the drama and the appeal that the Emira has. So each of these cars is just trading blows. There are some things that the Porsche does better, some things the Emira does better. Another thing that the Porsche does better is the build quality. You can feel that, like, the solidity to all the touch points is superior here. There's no denying that. I would say the Emira interior looks more special, and this feels a little bit more commonplace, a little bit more, you know, just like, I mean, this core design came out even in the 987. It had, you know, it's updated from that, but the core design is very, very similar. This doesn't feel as modern or as sexy or as special when you're in the cockpit, but the touch points all feel great. It has that solidity. Both these cars are excellent choices, but they're clearly for different drivers with different priorities. The Porsche has much more of this balanced nature. It is more predictable, easy to drive. It doesn't have as much of a learning curve. The downside is that it feels more clinical, but you get better build quality. You get arguably better reliability. We have yet to see what happens with the Emira, even though it is powered by a Toyota V6. It's not really the engine that's the problem in the Emira. Sometimes electronics historically have had issues. You get better build quality and solidity that's engineered into modern Porsches, which feel amazing. The inputs are a little bit more one-to-one in certain ways, But the Emira, in my opinion, is the far more special car to drive. The steering is vastly superior. The transmission is more fun and enjoyable to use, although occasionally frustrating. The pedal box being shifted, you get used to it. The interior looks far more special. Again, the build quality isn't quite Porsche level. The exterior styling is amazing. It has double wishbone, which is theoretically superior, but again, the way it's tuned is that you get more understeer, you get a little bit more drama, it's a little bit more, you have to work for it. And again, that learning curve adds to the appeal, adds to the fun factor. But both are just such amazing cars to drive. After driving both of them back to back on this road, it reaffirms my decision that for me and for the kind of driver that I am, the Lotus Emira appeals to my prioritization of steering feel and connectedness. The way that the chassis communicates with you, the brakes, everything just is so communicative and you feel one-to-one with the car in that way. Whereas the Porsche, you have more polish, you have that solidity. The communication isn't to the same degree though. It's a little bit muted. Trade-offs. My friends, which one would you go for? The Lotus Emira or the Porsche Cayman GTS 4.0? Leave a comment down below. Big thanks to the owners for letting me review their vehicles. Shout out to Venton's son, aka Zypoppy from the Zygreen YouTube channel, for making this review possible. My friends, if you want your car reviewed, visit us on JabalaandCars.com. Much love, my friends, and I'll see you all in that next one.